Okay, thank you very much for coming back from coffee, timely fashion. Not too bad for compliance professionals. Okay, my name is Jonathan Bowdler. I'm going to do the next session for you, focusing on the compliance and the governance risk and compliance qualifications. I'll take you through in a moment how they are structured, but please do, although there'll be questions at the end as well, if you want to ask any questions as I'm talking through, just wave at me or get my attention some other way, politely, obviously. Okay, so let me just start by sort of giving you some indication as why you should be so interested in a career in compliance. Last November, Barclays got fined by the FCA 72 million plus change. I'm not quite sure where they managed to get the £69,400 from, but anyway, we'll call it 72 million. And this was actually linked to financial crime, but it was about the systems and controls around financial crime risk. And basically, it all related to a single transaction. Although it was made up of a number of transfers, it was a single transaction. And this transaction of 1.88 billion actually earned Barclays 52.3 million. So you can see why they were keen to do it. However, because of the commercial pressure and the keenness to do this transaction, not only did they fail to identify these customers as politically exposed persons and take the enhanced due diligence that they should have, they actually didn't even take the full standard due diligence. They didn't follow their own standard requirements. Now, the reason I picked on this particular case is because I'm sure you're all aware, those of you who've worked in a compliance role, and those of you who are going to, will realise that there is, how can I put it, not a conflict exactly, but a pressure between commercial considerations and regulatory considerations. But if you get it wrong, these are the type of consequences that will hit you and your firm. And what's particularly interesting about this case, this last sentence here, there wasn't actually anything wrong with this transaction. It was not the proceeds of crime. It was not criminal activity. So they hadn't actually done anything wrong in terms of the outcome, but their systems and controls were not effective enough. And this is actually a way in which the regulator is getting a lot better at being very proactive in its actions. It does not necessarily now wait for something to go wrong and investigate. It looks at what you're doing and says, could something go wrong? And that is a very big step forward we've seen, probably post-credit crisis, last 5 or 6 years particularly. And it's a welcome approach. Think about it, forget our industry for a moment, think about it from the point of view of the public and particularly, of course, the media. A regulator's more effective if they stop things going wrong than by tidying up afterwards. So when you work in a compliance role, you have to actually think like the regulator. You have to sort of basically work on behalf of your firm. You are a member of your business and you want your business to succeed, but you have to do so with the mind of the regulator. And actually with financial crime, I'm sure Beck will mention it later, with the mind of the criminal as well, which is quite fun. We do some exercises based around pretending to be criminals, but we also do exercises based around, so what should regulators do? And quite often we actually have regulators in the room, which is quite fun. So if you are from a regulatory background, you will get picked on in the workshops, but in a good way, because it's great to learn from regulators when they come along. And we have ex-FSA, ex-FCA and PRA people coming and doing our course. So that's just a little example of a very recent case. Let me take you through sort of why it's so important to have both a qualification as well as, if possible, the experience. But taking on from Chad's point earlier about getting a role in compliance, if you don't have the experience, you will not get an interview without the qualification. Ideally, employers are looking for both. But if you either have experience and no qualification, or no experience and a qualification, then it's up to you to make a case for being interviewed. And whilst we often get the question, if I do this qualification, will I get a job? The answer is, well, I'm afraid it is up to you at the end of the day. But it will certainly improve your chances of getting the job that you want. A lot of what we cover on the course means you'll do a better application and definitely a much better interview, as well as having that qualification on your CV. So there's a strong link between what we do and getting the jobs. But why do we need these jobs? Why is there this requirement? It's already been mentioned, actually, in one of Becca's earlier points, that the change that we see in the regulatory environment is so rapid, it means we never get bored. Okay? Wouldn't it be nice to get bored once in a while? Actually have all of your work finished and think, what shall I do next? Doesn't actually happen, never does. So whilst we're all, whether it be compliance or risk professionals, we're also change managers. And a lot of what we do in our role is about what is the next change, what is coming in the future. Often I get asked what's the difference between a compliance professional and an audit professional. And my simplest answer, there's lots of differences, is that audit professionals tend to look at the present and the past. What have we been doing and what are we doing today? Whereas compliance does look at the present to a degree with its monitoring, but it also, very much so, has to look ahead, what is going on in the future. And it has to be looking ahead to see what is coming for that firm. So the change is important. We've also seen, again, post-credit crisis, a real focus on change in terms of not necessarily can I do this or can't I do this by following the rules, but should I do this? It's about behaviour, what's right and wrong, not necessarily what does it say in the legislation or the rules. And that, again, is a significant step. It means the requirements on us have changed. We have to go from being technical experts, which we still need, to being people person, understanding what motivates individuals, why they behave in certain ways, and how we can change that behaviour. It's actually made the job even more interesting. If you want to study something alongside your qualification, because you love studying, do a bit of psychology. Understanding why that particular manager is being such a pain. Okay? It's helpful in your role. The changing nature of the role of the compliance function and compliance officer in terms of it, we are there to provide assurance to the business. So we help write policy and procedure, we make sure it's fit for purpose, and we do some monitoring. But that's the traditional role of a compliance officer. We still have to do it, but we are now also trusted advisors. We have to advise the business both on planned activity and on unforeseen events. And we are also trainers and educators. It is our job to make sure our business knows what it needs to know. And that is a completely different skill set. If you want to be a head of compliance, you have got to be an excellent communicator. So again, one of the modules on the course, one of the workshop exercises, is about developing those interpersonal skills, the soft skills that are required in these roles. And I think probably what really makes a difference now, because of the regulatory environment, because of the focus, it actually gives you a better sort of ability to make a contribution to your business, its success. I was christened back in 2001 when I started in compliance, the Business Prevention Unit. You know, you're there to tell us what we can't do, tell us when we do things wrong. It can become quite negative. But actually, when you do it properly, you are a business enabling function. You are there to help the business do good business. You have to define what good business is, by the way, but that tends to mean sustainable, rather than just saying yes and no. Because if you say yes and no and let the business get on with it, are they actually going to come and ask you next time? You've got to be involved. There was an argument for saying that compliance function, you should be independent. And I've even seen it in academic papers. Compliance must be independent. I disagree. But we can argue that in the workshops. But you've actually got to work with the business. You've got to be pragmatic. You've got to have the right level of independence and the level of authority. But if you don't work with the business, how are you going to know what's going on? Somebody mentioned the 3 lines of defence earlier. Everybody, I think, knows roughly what the 3 lines of defence model is. It was Chad, wasn't it, mentioned 3 lines of defence. Actually, that's a bad name for it. It is 3 lines, and you know the first line is the business, the second line is perhaps where you traditionally put compliance, and the third line might be audit. You don't work on those lines. If you worked on those lines, you'd never talk to each other. It should be called the 2 gaps of defence. But that sounds terrible. But you actually work in those gaps, don't you? Your job in the second line is to work with the first line. And you actually, in the real world, on a practical point of view, you're working in the gaps to help your business. And then finally on here, it's already been covered, so very briefly, it's a wonderful career opportunity now. You have entry roles, you can end up on the board. The only thing determining where your career ends up is you. And that is really an excellent place to be in any position of the role. Now, the courses are very topical. What happened today? I've just had a text this morning. Germany are putting a proposal through to say that there can be no cash transactions in Germany above 5,000 euros. Okay, that's hot off the press this morning. And these are the things we bring to the course, we bring to the workshops, the things we expect you to bring to your assignments and your assessments. What is actually going on? The materials are refreshed regularly. that you can't refresh them every day. So the workshops, your studying and the reading list that we give you, the Q&A forum, the rolling news feeds, all part of the educational process. So you can stay right up to date. Some of our key hot topics at the moment, this is my favourite one. We talked this time last year about the impact of the election in the UK. And we were talking about what will happen if we have another coalition, or if Labour win, or, as it turned out, the Conservatives win. And we have seen exactly what we were thinking would happen. We have a Conservative government, a more business-focused government, if you like, at the beginning of an economic growth period, and effectively, they're telling the regulator, back off. Martin Wheatley has gone. He's not happy, so therefore he said, I'm not continuing. We've seen a real struggle to recruit his replacement, and Tracy McDermott did her best, and then eventually, I think, through frustration, said, I'm out of this. And we've had Andrew Bailey appointed, who's the PRA, Bank of England regulator, to regulate the conduct regulator? I think that raises a lot of questions. Kind of questions we will discuss and debate in the workshops. So we are seeing this change. How are things going to change going forward? We're in the middle of it. We've also, of course, got the referendum coming up this year. Now, that is going to have a huge impact on pretty much all of your businesses, and not just if we vote to step outside the EU. The whole impact about the renegotiated agreement will have an impact on your business. So what are you doing about it? We've seen a much more focus on governance and accountability. So we've got the new senior management regime, we've got the new certification regime sitting underneath it. How are you going to comply with it is one thing, but also how are you actually going to make sure that you take advantage of it? Any regulatory change is a risk, absolutely. But any risk has opportunities attached to it. So this is where you start moving away from the business prevention unit and start saying, so what can we do with this regulatory change that will work to my firm's benefit? Because there are usually opportunities attached. Use your judgment. And the word judgment is deliberately in inverted commas there, because I don't know what it means. Do you know what it means? Judgment-led regulator. Use your judgment. It is open to interpretation. So it's very much not black and white. This is, again, taking us down this route. Is we have to interpret what that means every day in our business to the questions we are being asked. So what kind of systems and controls do you come up with when somebody says, can I do this? First thing you say is, it shouldn't be can I, it should be should I? And then your rationale for yes, I should has to be based on the judgments you have made. What are the judgments? What evidence did you use? Document it. We need to be able to back up our judgments. We'll get things wrong, and that's fine. You can get things wrong as long as you didn't get it wrong because you didn't follow the procedure, you didn't think about it, you didn't actually challenge, you just went ahead and did something. So we're getting into a very nebulous area here with governance, accountability, using your judgments. How do you turn that into systems and controls in your business? These are the kind of topics we will be talking about. So I've already mentioned the new senior managers regime. It's a great opportunity to, how shall I say this, frighten them a little bit. It's a call to action. You do know what will happen in the future, guys, if you get things wrong. Okay? It's unlikely many people will end up in jail for 7 years, but it's there. It's an interesting one. We're also seeing the continuing development of the conduct agenda. Now, I always ask people, first workshop, what's the name of the main UK financial services regulator? What do you think the answer I get is? Who's going to tell me? FCA, thank you. Wrong. Sorry? You're all sitting there now thinking, what's he talking about? FCA are 3 letters. You've got to think and say the Financial Conduct Authority. The clue is in the name. What's the best simile for conduct? Anyone? If you said, put another word in there. It's not conduct, what is it? Behaviour. Behaviour. It's the Financial Behaviour Authority almost, isn't it? We are the Financial Conduct Authority. We are focusing on your conduct, how you behave. It's not do this, do this, do this. It's how are you going to behave in this situation? And again, that makes our role very difficult. One of the key impactors on how you behave, of course, is remuneration. So there's quite a lot of focus on remuneration codes, remuneration policies. That will continue under the new senior managers regime as well. It's one of our tools. So I've started talking about some key topics. What we then have to do is drive those down into, so what are we going to do about it? What kind of systems and controls do we need in place? What kind of communication plans, education plans? How do we make sure that our senior managers see us as that business enabling function? Why they come to us, why we are involved in how we run the business. Okay, and of course, this slide will be out of date soon. I don't know how or why, but something will occur. And that will suddenly jump up the agenda. We were talking to somebody yesterday about there's a conference on the conduct agenda that's scheduled for the summer. It's a bit of a danger scheduling conferences 6 months ahead in our world. By that time, will the conduct agenda be, given what we're seeing in terms of changes at the FCA? Okay, so key areas we focus on the course. First of all, one of the great joys of the course, I think, is you all have your jobs to do. So you go and work, you have your job in front of you, you have to get on with it, absolutely. This course allows you to step back and sort of say, there's my job, why do I do it? What's the bigger picture? So you can actually say, do I really understand why I do what I do? Why we as a function do what we do? Because understanding what's behind everything actually will change your approach to how you do things. If you understand the reason for it, for example, the regulatory objectives, then it actually might change your approach and be more focused and more effective in what you do. We also then look at how GRC, as a, if you like, a concept, they're 3 different disciplines, but they are all interlinked or combined, how they underpin not just compliance, but the success of the business. I'll give you a quick free lesson here. There are many definitions of corporate governance. The UK one is it's the system by which companies are directed and controlled, which is fine. But actually, to understand governance properly, you have to say, what's its purpose? What's it there for? And it's there to make better decisions. That is the only purpose of corporate governance, to make decisions. And if you do it well, you make better decisions. So forget regulation for a second. If you have effective corporate governance in your business will make better decisions, it will be more successful. End of story. And what do you base those decisions on? The risks that you are prepared to take, the risks you want to take. So when we look at risk management as well, risk management is not about avoiding risk. It's about taking risk. It's a positive thing. Risk management is about looking at risks that you perhaps couldn't take and bringing them within your appetite so you can take them. And the more risk you can take, if it's appropriate, the more successful you will be. So there's so much of what we do which is actually critical success for your business. It is not just compliance. We talk about how to use the resources at your disposal effectively. We'll do an exercise. We'll get you to redesign your compliance function. We'll get you to redesign your corporate governance strategy to say, if you could start from scratch, what would you have? And you'll come up with these wonderful presentations and we'll share them with each other and we'll learn from it. And then at the end of it, we'll say, well, how does that compare with what you actually do have? And if they're not the same, why not? And what are you going to do about it when you go back to your office? Because if you draw up your perfect compliance function and it's not what you've got, you need to do something. So again, very practical in what you can take away. And we look at how, behind all of this, we are implementing systems and controls to make sure we actually do meet the regulatory requirements. So we have corporate governance codes, we have regulatory handbooks, we have all sorts of things that must be complied with, and you must not forget that is, if you like, your line in the sand. But then how far beyond that do you go for the success of your business? We'll talk a lot about best practices, and you might say, quite rightly in a workshop, well, you've told me what the best practice is. We're miles away from that, we can't get there, we're here. So we say, okay, from there, how do you get to there? And then how do you get to there? Because frankly, by the time you get to there, it would have moved anyway. It would be down here somewhere. So it's not actually a target you have ever got to get to. It's a target you have got to be moving towards. Okay? Making sure that you reach your own personal potential. As we said earlier about the career steps, you have the opportunity here to take your career as far as you want. And a lot of what you learn on this course, because it's focused on skills and professionalism, as opposed to, for example, going through the rule books in detail. We do look at specific rules, things that are emerging and that are new and that are important, but actually most of what we cover are skills. Then you'll be using what you've learned on this course in 10 years' time, without a doubt. We've got somebody at the moment doing the postgrad, the Oxford postgrad, who did our certificate on the very first round in 2002. And she's come back 13 years later to do the postgrad. And she's actually coming along to our conference in Guernsey next week to tell everybody how brilliant we are, which is nice. We've got somebody to do that for us in a moment as well, just in case we weren't getting it across to you. Okay, and all of our qualifications, they are practical, pragmatic, relevant to what you are doing. The one thing we can't do on our course is give you, if you like, the advice to take your learning and what you then need to do in your business the next day. That final stage is still up to you, but we can give you lots of help and advice and hints and tips about what you should be doing. And everything you learn, you can question and say, how can I use this? Sometimes the answer might be, well, that's not relevant to what I do, so I can't for now, and you can park it. But there'll be an awful lot of what you learn that you can go right back into your business straight away, lots of quick wins, as well as ideas for changing things over the coming months and years. Going to do a quick time check. Lovely. Good job I did, running out of time. Okay, so which qualification is right for you? This is quite often the question we get. I would say actually need to do this one-to-one. Okay, because everybody's individual circumstances change. Already been doing it in the break. I'll be out there when we finish the session. We have, within the GRC world, the postgraduate for the senior people, the diploma, which if you like is the standard, industry standard qualification. Then we have the advanced certificate and the certificate. But we also this year, we're relaunching an advanced certificate in business compliance for those of you not in financial services, that focuses on more generic industry areas of regulatory compliance. And as Bill mentioned earlier as well, the advanced certificate in legal compliance for those of you who are acting as the compliance officer in law firms. Okay, so look at the syllabuses online, see what these qualifications cover, what is most relevant to you, but then talk to us. Do talk to us. Bill?
So one very important point I failed to mention earlier is you can access or come into the system at any level, depending upon your background and experience and where you feel you're going. You don't have to do certificate, then advanced certificate, then diploma. Many people can just start at diploma or even a postgraduate if you've got the right entrance requirements. So that's an important factor in terms of where shall I go into the system. It's not sequential. A lot of people do, as Jonathan said, they may start and do a certificate, advanced certificate, then diploma, but that's not a requirement. You've got the right background, if you're a graduate or you've worked, say, for 7 or 8 years in industry, you could just go straight into the diploma level qualifications. Yeah. Well, you've got to look at your background. How long have you worked? What is your general level of education? Is the key. Those are the key issues. And again, and talk to us. Yeah. You know, bring us up. We'll talk to you on a one-to-one. Talk to us today. That's why there's so many of us here. And we can try and give you that guidance. I do apologise, Jonathan.
I'll let you off, Bill. Yeah, I mean, Becca and I have been doing this for 8 years now. You know, we've had hundreds and thousands of people doing the courses. We can pretty much tell you what's going to be right for you if you talk to us. Okay? Okay, so finally, I just wanted to give you an idea of a workshop exercise as well, the kind of things that we do on the GRC workshops. So I will introduce a particular topic. This one will be about resource use, for example. So we're talking about how you use the resources at your disposal. It will usually follow on from a risk session where we're talking about risk being a way of prioritising your resources. So I'll set an example here where you've got 30 minutes to redesign your compliance function from scratch on a blank sheet of paper. And you'll be doing it in groups in a workshop. So let's say there are 5 groups of 5 people. And after the 30 minutes is up, you come up with your structure charts and you explain this is the structure, this is why we have it, and this is why it's absolutely flipping brilliant. And the other groups will be sitting there and their task will be to pull it to pieces and tell you why it won't work. Because that way, we learn from each of the 5 individual presentations. What have you used? There are about 5 or 6 methodologies for doing this, which you'll learn on the course. Why have you chosen the methodology you've chosen? Why have you used a hybrid of 2 models? Why does that work for a retail firm, whereas that works for a more commercial organisation? And we go through all of these options, so by the end of the exercise, the first thing that everybody then does is goes around with their mobile phone and takes photos of all of the structures. So you can amalgamate them, take them away, and say, what can I learn from it? And what I would also then say is, go back and do it for your business. Because obviously in the workshop, we'd be saying, do it for a generic firm, so that you can all get involved. But then take that exercise away and do it for your firm, and see where that takes you. My time's up. Okay, so don't just take my word for it. A couple of nice quotes from ex-delegates here. If you've got any doubts at all about which qualification to take, or even to take one, although by the end of the day I hope we convinced you, talk to people who have done our qualifications. We live and die by our reputation, and it comes from people who have done the courses. Nearly, I don't know what the percentage is, Lily will probably be able to tell you, but a high percentage of you will be here because you've been told by people who have done it before that it really does enhance you in terms of your current role and hopefully your future ones. So there's our mugshots. Only myself and Viri are here today. Rod's busy away actually doing some proper work. Okay, so talk to us, any questions, any comments, anything afterwards, please feel free. So although I finished my time, 1 minute, anybody want to ask me any devastatingly difficult questions? No? Oh, yes, there we go. 1 second, microphone's on its way to you.
Hi. How do you differentiate yourself between the other competitors in the world for doing this sort of course, for example, CISI?
Lovely question. CISI, ACAMS, there are other qualifications. I can only tell you from my own experience from talking to people about these qualifications, as well, of course, I've done gap analysis and looked at it myself. The other qualifications do tend to be set in today's world. This is what you need to know to get the qualification. Most of the examination is multiple choice on all of those things. Okay, some of it's not. There are some places where you've got to write essays and give advice, etc. But what we do is they are more about developing you as professionals. Also, of course, the certification side of it from Manchester Business School gives it more of a global, I would say, sort of kudos in terms of educational and academic background to simply being an industry training program. But the best thing to do is to speak to people. I had this same conversation yesterday. I was in Edinburgh doing this yesterday, and somebody was looking at doing the CISI exam, and they were looking at ours, and looking at the syllabuses, they said, I can see, that there are similarities and there are some differences. But by the time we'd finished our conversation, it was very much around the fact that what we do is we train you as individuals. We don't teach you stuff. We develop you as people. And I can see Bill getting itchy again. Do you want to say something, Bill?
No, the only point I would make is...
He says no and stands up.
No, I wasn't getting itchy. The point I would make would be that it's the face-to-face component of the training. Some other organisations will outsource the training to different people and different organisations to train. CISI as an organisation is a very good organisation and lays the parameters of the programme and gives you your learning material. But the actual delivery of the training is done by outsourced people. And therefore the big difference here is these people here are part of our organisation who, in fact, deliver the training. I'm sure you probably agree. The quality of the delivery that we have is very, very high. But it's not a question here of say, this is the best and they're not. There are some very good qualifications out there. On the AML side, people know there's an American body called ACAMS that gives certifications. But again, we would differentiate ourselves there in terms of the fact that their base level of qualification, they do multiple choice testing, and you don't have to do any course. You could literally just go online and do the test. And I find it difficult. We are producing professionals here, and we're producing professionals through an established university route of qualifications and education. What we can say is that the ICA qualifications are benchmarked against the university system. They've got high branding, they're proven track record, and it's therefore an evaluation of when you look at, you've got to then look at the syllabuses and content, how the programs are delivered, and what it will give to you at the end of the day. I think that's the decisions that people have to make when they're looking and comparing organisations.
Okay, I better stop it there. Unless there's a burning question, I'll answer them afterwards, but I'll blame Bill for overrunning.